This is the Plagmanrules Podcast. Welcome back for today's edition. Today we've got a lot of stuff to cover. We've got the weekend box office. We got a couple of Hollywood legends who have passed away. We've got a big word on the Venice Film Festival, which film is going to open it. And of course, we've got all the D-23 coverage. We might kind of breeze through some stuff, but yeah, let's see how this episode goes. We're going to jam-pack a lot of stuff into this episode and see how it goes. Okay, so we're going to start with the weekend box office report. All right, here we go. Number one was War for the Planet of the Apes. I had a review on last Friday's show. I think this is one of the three best films of the year. This, Spider-Man Homecoming, and Get Out, I think are among the three best films of the year so far. I'll tell you what, the number that came up was $56.5 million. Now, immediately you're going to have people screaming, my God, what happened here? And, to a degree, I'm kind of on that same boat, but I'm not as shocked. You know why? Because tracking on this movie, at least for opening weekend, has never been great. They've always listed this movie as opening lower than the last film, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. And, I've been trying to think, why is that? And then I looked actually on Thursday morning, they had the reports from the Thursday night screenings, which was what I went to, and it was higher than Dawn for the Planet of the Apes. So I was thinking, oh, okay, so maybe War will actually be higher, and we've all just been, misinterpreting all the data. But no. It actually is, maybe we'll get the final numbers here in a little bit, and we'll find out it might be the lowest opening of these three movies in this trilogy, which makes no sense to me, number one, because it's the best, and number two, because it's coming off of Dawn. There are three reasons that I think are attributing to why this movie is not opening to $60, $65, $70 million. Number one, this movie, at least in the marketing, has always looked like an extremely grim, not very light movie. Whereas Spider-Man Homecoming, every preview had tons of laughs in it. Despicable Me had tons of laughs in it. Baby Driver, very entertaining trailers. And so on and so forth for everything. But War for the Planet of the Apes looks like it's a straight-up drama, which it is. That can turn some people off. Number two, we just had Spider-Man Homecoming come out. And even though, yes, Spider-Man Homecoming did drop to second place and it had a bigger drop than I thought it would, that's still some pretty stiff competition. Plus the fact that Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, to a degree, was a little more family-friendly, at least by the marketing standards for sure. Those are two big factors there. But I think the third factor is what's keeping this from being at least a 60, 65 million, and that is the repeat factor for a lot of the big fans of this series, because a lot of the fans of this series kind of cross over into the comic book fans, into those kind of big budget blockbuster fans. And there was a lot going on this weekend. D-23 was going on. A lot of people wanted to be glued to their screens to figure out what's happening with Infinity War, what's happening with all these Disney things, what's happening with Star Wars. And some of that stuff does keep people at home. And then we've also got Comic-Con coming up that starts later on this week. So there's some people that are actually, who are in the big fan base for this movie that are on their way to Comic-Con. They're not really going out to see War for the Planet of the Apes. And to a degree, this film, I think it was tracking at about 55 million opening weekend last I checked. They had it as high as 60 at one point and as low as 50 on the dot. So to a degree, it did come above expectations, but barely. And I put it at 60 million on my blog. That's on Movie Blogger, by the way, if you want to go check that out. I put it at 60 million. I put Spider-Man at like 58. I thought it was going to be very close. So War for the Planet of the Apes, even though it's a terrific movie, and I did kind of cite it in my review last week, I said, I don't know how often I'm going to rewatch this. It is a grim movie at times, very almost depressing material in there at times. That was kind of the word from the advertising, so that makes sense for why it wasn't like a huge record-setting number or anything like that. So yeah, Spider-Man Homecoming, we'll talk about this a little bit, a 61% drop from last week. Now, I was thinking for sure it was going to be over 50%, but I wasn't quite thinking the 60% range. A lot of that just from the amazingly great reviews, a lot of really good word of mouth. So, yeah, I was kind of surprised. And at this rate, it is now just under $470 million at the worldwide box office after 2 weekends. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, as far as budget and stuff, it's broken even. It's getting money back for Sony. Let's talk about a couple other things at the box office here. We've got Baby Driver dropped 32%. That's pretty solid. Almost another $9 million this weekend. For a domestic total just shy of $75 million, and now a worldwide total just under $100 million. For a $34 million movie, that's really good. And especially for a movie like that, which I thought would get lost in the shuffle, it's really holding strong. And in the top 5, The Big Sick. We talked about this one last week, doing very well in limited release. Now, in wide release, it's just shy of 2,600 theaters here. To do 7.6 million, that's all right. The per theater average is less than 3,000. I was hoping it would go higher than that. And I haven't seen it yet. Hopefully I'll be able to see it here very shortly. Okay, we've got Wish Upon also opened here. 5.5 million for a little horror movie like this. Only cost him 12 million, so as long as it does okay the second weekend, if it can hold on after that and get to maybe like 15 or 20 million here in the States, it should be okay. It hasn't opened in the overseas markets yet, so we'll see. They're probably not going to add way too much. But 5.5 million, it was tracking at 8.5, so yeah, that's lower than that for sure. I thought 8.5 was crazy. I think I put it at 7 million, so that's a little closer there. But still, not a terrific result, and especially when we consider last summer what happened with horror movies. We had Lights Out come out, which blew the roof off of expectations. I mean, the film went on to gross 67 million here in the States and another 80 million outside the US for nearly $150 million off of a less than $5 million production budget. That is insane. And then not too long after that, like a little over a month later, we've got Don't Breathe. And that one, again, shocked us, shocked everybody. People were saying for the opening weekend, I think I put it at like 12 or 13 million. It opened at 26 million. It more than doubled my expectations. And it grossed nearly 90 million here in the States and went over 150 million after the worldwide box office was contributed there. When you consider last summer that horror was huge in those degrees, but this summer has just not been a good one for horror at all. Anyway, so one more thing we're going to mention here very quickly. Wonder Woman now is at over 380 million here in the States. Dropped less than 30% last weekend. Okay, I'm convinced. It's going to pass Guardians of the Galaxy. I was kind of questionable on it last weekend, but now Guardians, it's getting less than 1 million every weekend, which means maybe 388 is going to be its top number there. But at this rate, I'm thinking Wonder Woman has a decent shot of crossing 400 million. As long as it's still in the 2,000 theaters by the end of the month, and people are still going to see it, I think it could definitely cross 400 million. And it'd be the second highest movie behind Beauty and the Beast, which got over 500 million, and that one's still making some money here at the box office. Okay, next thing we're going to talk about, and it's a sad subject. We lost 2 very famous people in Hollywood over the weekend here, and actually they were reported within hours of each other. George Romero and Martin Landau. We'll start with George Romero quick. We are a little pressed for time today, so I wish I could take more time to express my feelings here, but George Romero is a legend in the film community. I mean, a lot of people today, millennials, even people under the age of 40 years old, really don't know who George Romero is or what impact he had on Hollywood and on filmmaking in general. And that's too bad, because this is a guy who really pioneered a lot of great things in film. I mean, first of all, his movie, Night of the Living Dead, if you haven't seen it, even if you're kind of a squeamish person, it's pretty tame by today's standards. There's a little bit of blood and guts here and there, a little bit of nudity for like a quick second, but it was extraordinary for the time. I mean, back then you have to remember, there was no rating system. There was no MPAA to say kids can't see this. There was no restriction on films. Sure, there were films before it like Bonnie and Clyde, which a lot of people objected to because of the violence. There were movies like Blow Up and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which were very extraordinary with their language. And it was because of Romero and his abilities as a director that he was able to pull that off so successfully that, yes, eventually the MPAA came in and said we have to start restricting certain audiences from going to see certain films. And to a degree, I know some people say, well, if Night of the Living Dead had been a flop or nobody had seen it, well, Rosemary's Baby would have come out a few months later, and then the MPAA would have come in and said, yeah, we got to restrict this. Sure, to a degree, that's true. But Romero continued to push the line, but it wasn't just that. It was the zombies. Today, zombies have become one of the biggest things. I mean, there's almost a movie every other week that comes out about zombies. Well, okay, maybe I'm exaggerating there, but it seems every other horror movie has to do something with zombies. And, of course, The Walking Dead, one of the most hugely successful shows in the last 10 years or so. That one, of course, wouldn't have been possible, wouldn't have been done without George Romero and Night of the Living Dead. So this is a guy who I think nowadays really wasn't remembered and wasn't given his due. Hopefully we can amend that and say, yeah, you know what, if not for Romero, zombies still would have been the thing of they're just slaves walking around without souls. That's all they were before then. Romero kicked it up a notch. by saying, hey, let's make them eat people, stuff like that. To a degree, yeah, that's encouraged violence in film, but I think with the MPAA, that kind of helped Hollywood realize there is an audience for this kind of stuff. We can do this extreme stuff, and that's kind of what led to a lot of the very big films in the 70s, like Last Tango in Paris, which really explored sexuality. You had other movies from the early 70s that really explored violence too. If it wasn't for Romero, a lot of that stuff wouldn't have happened. So he changed a lot of things in Hollywood as we know it. So I think hats off to him. Guy was 77 years old. He did a lot for us, and he should be remembered very well as the man who really changed the game for a lot of people in a lot of genres in Hollywood. Okay, so then also it was very sad to hear that we lost Martin Landau over the weekend there. Martin Landau, terrific actor. I mean, this is a guy who always had a twinkle in his eye. Probably one of the first films I saw him in was that Adventures of Pinocchio film with Jonathan Taylor Thomas. I mean, I haven't seen it in years, so for all I know, it sucks. But I remember watching it as a kid, and it was always a very entertaining movie for me back then. And Martin Landau was an actor who, even in films like Baps, which nobody has heard of, but just watching the trailer, I'm sure you'll be convinced you don't want to go anywhere near it. He brought it, and he had, again, that twinkle in his eye. He was always happy to be there, and he was always able to bring a lot of stuff to his character. He had 3 Oscar nominations. He won his Oscar for Ed Wood. Just an absolutely remarkable performance. A great representation of the character of Bela Lugosi in that farcical way, because obviously Lugosi was not as foul-mouthed as he is in the movie. He wasn't quite as extreme as he was. Sure, he didn't like Karloff. He never got to the point where he said, Karloff does not deserve to smell my shit, which is what he said in Ed Wood, which is one of the most brilliant scenes in that movie. And Ed Wood, I think, does stand up as Tim Burton's best film. I think Martin Landau's performance is what really makes it that. It was a great movie by itself. Johnny Depp, one of his better performances. Everything else about the movie, very entertaining script, very entertaining subject matter. But cast somebody else in that Bela Lugosi role, it's going to be a different movie. And I think he brought it to that movie. He's always brought it to the movies. And we're all the worse for his loss. And yeah, I know he hasn't been making too many films lately. He was 89 years old when he passed. So, he's been around a while, but still great stuff there. And of course, anybody who says that Martin Landau can rot in hell because he cost Samuel L. Jackson his Oscar, go fuck yourself. Martin Landau deserved that Oscar more than any other actor did that year. You guys probably haven't seen Ed Wood, those of you who say that. He was a terrific actor. He gave a magnificent performance in that film. He gave pretty good performances just across the board in all his roles. And, of course, very fun to watch him in stuff like Mission Impossible when he's much younger playing Roland Hand. You could even see then he was a very versatile, very expressive actor who always brought it. Yeah, whether you love his old stuff with Mission Impossible, his later stuff like Ed Wood and Adventures of Pinocchio, okay, I'll mention that. He always did a good job. He always did what actors have to do, which is make the director's vision something that the audience can physically see on screen. And I think Landau, more than most actors, really represented that with everything he did. Okay, so with that over, we're going to move on now. I'm going to just quickly mention this, but we have some kind of big news with the Venice Film Festival. And the Venice Film Festival, probably the first big film festival we get before we get launched into Oscar season. Venice is usually the first one that everybody's like, oh, okay, so this is where our heavy hitters come in. Like we had La La Land was the premiere film last year, went on to win 6 Oscars, and come as close as any other film in history to winning Best Picture and not doing it. Literally, you can't say that about any other film. It's a pretty significant deal to be opening night there. A couple years ago, we had Birdman open up the Venice Film Festival that year. That was 2014. That went on to win Best Picture. So the honor this year for that slot is going to Alexander Payne's new film, Downsizing. Now, first of all, with Alexander Payne, his last movie was Nebraska, which I think is going to go down as one of the best films of this decade. It's hilarious. It's got an endearing story, an endearing main character. It's just a movie you can't help but love. I know it's in black and white, so that turns off a lot of younger people. But still, especially if I'm from the Midwest, so it, really relates to me. Even if you're not from the Midwest, I think there's enough relatability in that movie that you're still like, I like this movie. Hopefully. So if you haven't given it a chance, try and find that one somewhere. So now with Downsizing, this is his new film. It's got Matt Damon, Kristen Wiig, Christoph Waltz, Alec Baldwin, Neil Patrick Harris, Jason Sudeikis in it. Margot Martindale, Laura Dern, Bruce Willis reportedly has a role in it. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's a rumor here at least. They haven't had any previews yet. I'm sure we'll get a trailer here before the end of August, which is when the Venice Film Festival starts, which is August 30th. First of all, anything Alexander Payne was going to do next after Nebraska, I'm interested in. I'm there. And he's partnered back up with his writing partner of Jim Taylor, who he worked with on Sideways and About Schmidt, and Descendants. So yeah, that's a good sign there too. And just the premise kind of sounds like it's going to be a comedy of some sorts. It's going to be a little sci-fi. Like this guy decides he's going to shrink himself is the main topic of it. Yeah, we don't know too much about it yet. It comes out in late December, right before Christmas. So yeah, we'll see how it does at the box office too. But this is one, even before the movie had come out, even before we got this news of it opening up the Venice Film Festival, I said, I'm very interested to see what this is going to be like, because I've been hearing about this for like 2 or 3 years now, whether that's just Payne in interviews or it's Matt Damon talking about it. But this is one that I'm very, very interested in seeing. And for it to be the opening night film for the Venice Film Festival, I think that's a great honor, and hopefully that's a great sign of what's to come. Okay, now we're going to go a little more rapid fire here through some of these D-23 stories. Some of them, I could go on for a while, but other ones, they're just kind of the basic announcement kind of deal. First of all, Toy Story 4, John Lasseter was supposed to co-direct this with Josh Cooley. Now, Lasseter is stepping out of the picture, and Cooley is solo directing it. Next thing, we got A Wrinkle in Time. We got the trailer for that, which I kind of like the trailer a lot, actually. Very intriguing, especially the kind of creepy images of all those clones in the suburb part. Very interesting looking movie. And Ava DuVernay, which, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of Selma, I'm very interested to see in what she does as a director in the future. Then we got the Star Wars The Last Jedi behind the scenes video, which was released online, so everybody has seen it now. And yeah, it didn't give too much of the story away, which behind the scenes featurettes are not supposed to. This wasn't supposed to be like a big trailer or anything that tells you stuff and shows you stuff. It's just a behind the scenes kind of fun, this is what we're doing, we're hard at work here kind of thing. So in that degree, yeah, it was fun to watch. I definitely don't think it's going to be something I'm going to watch, every day from now on and just try to get clues out of it. But it's still, for what it was a fun job there. Dumbo, we got a little bit of news on Dumbo, like the release date coming up in spring of 2019. Michael Keaton is officially cast in it. We already knew Eva Green and Danny DeVito and Colin Farrell, but those were some other names to bring up there, and that they're shooting now in London. I'm kind of interested to see what Tim Burton brings to it. Okay, this is kind of a bigger one. The first footage from Avengers Infinity War was shown, was not released online, so we don't know about it. But my God, it sounds like it's everything and the kitchen sink thrown in. I'll try to run through here what I've heard. Captain America has a beard now. Black Widow is a blonde. We've got a part, supposedly, where Thanos, with the Infinity Gauntlet or whatever, is bringing a moon down and trying to crush the Avengers, including Iron Man and the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, supposedly there's a part where Thor is riding through space and slams into the Guardians of the Galaxy, and they try to interrogate him or something, but then they just kind of team up or whatever, which we know everybody's coming together for this. So just those little things there really sound intriguing. There was also a lot of the cast showed up at the panel, which means that they're excited about it, of course. This is going to be the big ending kind of for what we've done so far with the Marvel Universe. So yeah, that's kind of looking forward to, of course, seeing the trailer whenever that's going to come out. But to hear that everybody liked the footage too, really good. A little bit of news on Aladdin. We've got Mena Massoud, I think that's how you pronounce his name, as Aladdin. And we've got Naomi Scott, who was in the Power Rangers movie as Jasmine. I like her casting. I thought she was okay in the Power Rangers movie. I didn't really like that movie in general, so oh well. I've never seen Mina in anything else. And Will Smith was confirmed. He is the genie, which I know a lot of people are still upset about Robin Williams, that they're doing this movie, even though Robin Williams passed away just a few years ago. But here's the thing, I loved Robin Williams, but it's time to let that go. The same thing goes with this Jumanji movie that's coming out. A lot of people are still offended that they're doing that. It's like, he was an actor. He did a job. It's not like he was the, person who brought up all this material and made it the movie himself. No, he was just an actor in it. You gotta let go at some point. Obviously if they had done something and tried to mimic him, it probably, would have been too much. But the fact that they're going a totally different way with Will Smith, and he might even be kind of a rapping genie, which I know sounds stupid right now, but you know what? You gotta try something different every once in a while. But, I can just picture it now. In West Philadelphia, genie raised. Or something weird like that. I'm kind of excited by this casting of Will Smith. I'd like to see what he does with it. Okay, they also had footage from The Lion King, the opening scene. It's the Circle of Life scene. Of course, that one, again, was not released online because the movie is still 2 years plus out. So, yeah, we're probably not even going to see a trailer to this thing till next Christmas, probably. At least just from the description, everybody very impressed by the CG, saying that it is really close to lifelike with the animals and everything, which is very exciting to hear. And it's Jon Favreau who did Jungle Book, which that was, Oscar-winning effects, obviously, so they were great stuff. And it's kind of exciting that they're going to supposedly push it to the next level. All right. One last thing here we'll talk about. That's Mary Poppins Returns. They had some footage from that shown. Again, that was not released online, just footage shown for them. And everybody said it has a feel and a tone and the musical score and everything very close to the original 1964 film. It feels like it's set in the same universe, which is obviously what you want. And that it's also really respectful to that too, which is really nice. Plus, they've got a tremendous cast in this. And they said the footage, very exciting. And I think some people who weren't very excited about a new Mary Poppins movies, now they're on board saying, yeah, after seeing the footage, it looks really good. All right, well, I guess that's going to wrap it up here. We had a lot of stuff going on here. Again, I could have spent way more time on a lot of these subjects, but, it's a lot of stuff today. Okay, so just a couple of quick housekeeping items here. First of all, if you want to leave a comment on things you like about the podcast, things you don't like about the podcast, go ahead and you can leave that here in the comments section here on YouTube. Otherwise, I do have a Gmail account that's set up. That's plagmanrulespodcast@gmail.com. PLAGMANRULES podcast@gmail.com. You can leave, again, a note there about that. Also, I'm open to taking up discussion points. Like there's a topic you want me to talk about that we haven't talked about yet in the news, or just something in general, or review requests if you have something like that in mind. Yeah, go ahead and leave a comment here again on YouTube, or you can use that Plagmanrules podcast@gmail.com account and I'll look it up there. Okay, so we've got Comic-Con coming up this week. I'm sure we'll have some stuff to talk about by Friday. It's kind of weird. It's like the week of Comic-Con, usually the big studios kind of hold off a little bit. But the smaller films, so that's why like stuff like Downsizing, they announced that stuff, they finally have their chance to be one of the bigger news stories of the week. So hopefully we'll get some more kind of smaller news stories like that. So just kind of imagine that. We're a little over a month away from being in the stage where we can finally start discussing, okay, what's going to be in the early frontrunner stage? What's going to be playing at all the festivals that we need to look out for? Stuff like that. I know. Time flies. Okay, so I'll be back again on Friday. We'll be talking about more stuff. Yeah, probably some Comic-Con stuff and whatever else comes up in the week. All right, have a good one. This has been the Plagman Rules Podcast.